Maverick traders. Welcome out to your market roundup, April 17th. Corey here with you. Let's jump into it and check out what's happening in the markets. Today, really a sideways day as you look at the price action. Dow, S&P, NASDAQ all flat. The rally is branching out a little bit with small caps up 1.29%. Now remember, the small cap weighting is heavily towards the banks, so they massively underperformed. Now they're getting a little bit of a bid and outperformance because we've passed some of the financial earnings and some of those things, and not quite as bad as what people had feared. Oil down, energy stocks were the worst performers today, and gold has had a little bit of an exhaustion high and kind of pulled back in the short term. As we look at the market news, markets are really consolidating nicely overall after some recent gains, and Empire State Manufacturing came in much better than expected. You can see last time it was a negative number, this time a nice beat and a positive number. Advanced decline line, about 60% of stocks going up, and on the 50-day moving average, we're holding steady at about half and half. So it's really, the recovery is still in place. There's still more stocks moving above their 50 MA than below it. So we're seeing that increase of momentum to the upside that's been going on for the past few weeks. As you look at the S&P, we're coming into resistance here where there can be a little bit of a pause and a little bit of a stalling out. Perhaps, one of my favorite patterns is the cup and handle. Perhaps we come up to it and then we back up and create a little bit of a handle and a shakeout before the next run higher. Ultimately, I'm not a bull, I would say, on the long term of the markets. I still think there's probably going to be some downside, but we'll just have to wait and know it when we see it. If the markets were to make a big, exhaustive type of upward flush out move, sort of turn parabolic. Sometimes it'll get a parabolic curvature and you just go violently higher, and then a big kind of exhaustion push. I'd probably get more negative, more profit taking specifically on the bullish trades. But right now, just kind of steady as she goes. Look at the NASDAQ. We're basing and consolidating after the recent move higher. This is just bullish price action. Forget about the name. Forget about your opinion on the economy, on politics, on this or that, and just say, if you see this pattern, does it normally go up and out from there? Yes, it does. It's more bullish than anything else. It kind of speaks to the fact that all they can muster, all the bears can do is keep it in a sideways range for a while after a big advance. That's more bullish and typically leads to higher prices. Today, Google down big on some specific news, but energy definitely the laggard. And I talked about this a week or two ago. Energy spiked up on this big oil rally, and it was probably a short-term exhaustion, like we said that day. I believe it was a couple of Mondays ago. And energy stocks haven't really given a good buy setup yet. So I'm still waiting on it. I tend to think that energy is going to go higher. Rob and I made a little bet at the start of the year. I thought oil prices would be higher for the year. He thought lower. So far, they're higher, but I have to say, if we go into a recession and so on later in the year, that should drag down energy prices. The good thing about oil is how bad I think that the U.S. has messed up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's at the lowest levels of reserves since like 1983, and they had a golden opportunity to buy oil and to fill up those reserves when we were down in 60s and so forth per barrel, and they didn't do it, and the markets have rocketed back up in the energy price. So I feel good that the SPR is so low and they have to fill it up. That should keep a floor under oil, and wouldn't it be something if we had sort of a perfect storm later this year where you're hit with the recession, the economy slows down, inflation sticky high, and energy is too high, and they don't even have the Strategic Petroleum Reserve filled up. It would be like a perfect storm against the markets, so to speak. So I feel good about it from that standpoint, but I do have to say, the thing that I wonder is if today was kind of, we've been pulling back, and then today they kind of flushed to the downside. So I am looking at energy as a possible bounce back area. Ultimately, the markets are bullish. Notice the upward slope in the moving averages is now starting. So now you're going from more yellow in slope to green and just still behaving pretty well overall. Let's look at a few charts as far as bullish and bearish candidates. The first one I'm going to highlight is Dell, and I thought that this was instructive for a few reasons. One, of course, we're breaking out, but two is that the stock is already overbought on the RSI, and when you get overbought, remember, when you first get overbought, you usually spike and go further, right, for the next week or two. So it's actually, when you first get overbought, it's more of a buy signal than anything else. And then today it was hit with quote unquote bad news. Bad news, but good price action. And so I always think about when something comes out. Now, this specifically was a downgrade. JP Morgan downgraded the stock and said, oh, it's too high, this or that, whatever. Well, I actually entered into a bullish position in Dell because number one, it shook that off and started to turn positive. And so I entered into a position feeling like when you turn positive, almost forget about the chart for a second. Just ask yourself, would I normally think that the stock should go up or down on this type of news? When it turns positive, even on a downgrade, that's a good market tell. The stock was downgraded and it's up 1.5% on the day. I'll use Alibaba as an example. Alibaba last week announced that they were getting into AI and that they were producing some. And so naturally, you'd kind of think, oh, the market's probably going to rally on that. That's probably going to be seen as good news. And what did Alibaba do? Gapped up a little bit and then turned negative. And from that AI announcement, I think it shot down about $7 or $8 per share, somewhere in that neighborhood in a straight line. Should have, would have, could have been good news and bad price action. Here, quote unquote bad news, right? Something that should theoretically be bad for the stock, and it turns positive, probably tells you there's a bit more upside to go. First Solar, here we have a breakout that's looming. You can see this thing has been consolidating and now starting to break higher on increased volume. Good price action today. Just looks like an upside trade. And then Ford, talk about a lot of things that have bad news, and this thing's been choppy and basing. I just like it for a low risk entry right here against the moving average. I suspect we're in a little mini cup and handle type of idea and just play it for a little short-term break higher. Not super aggressive. It's a slow, kind of quiet mover, and maybe it'll just stay choppy, but I kind of see that as a little upside potential trade. Best Buy, I think we had this one highlighted last week and still looks bearish to me. Right down there at support. Should start to break down sooner rather than later, I would anticipate. Moderna, you can see the break of the trend line. So here's your uptrend line, your corrective phase, and now we've broken to the downside. Now it's probably a little late to be chasing today, already down 8%. What I would do in those situations a lot of time is take the size of this candle and break it into four parts and say, okay, here's the bottom, here's the middle, and here's the top section. And about right here is the spot you'd like to initiate a short position. It's what we call price overlap, where a lot of times the most common candlestick after a big expanded range candle is an inside day, just kind of a quiet day. And will they try to rally it up at some point, maybe up to 148 or so? Yeah, probably. But it'll probably encounter sellers and then continue this path to the downside. So we're a little late on the breakdown. You could be looking in this area, that second fourth of the downside candle, just for a little price overlap type of idea. Last but not least, Tesla. Now, this one reports earnings, and it's not for the faint of heart. This has a lot of volatility, but I see it as kind of a low basing. They call it a bear flag, where you shoot down and then you get this little upward slope, and the next move should be to the downside out of this. Again, earnings throw a curveball. It's got a lot of volatility, but an interesting little short-term downside trade if you're willing to trade it through that earnings announcement. So stocks continue on an upward path. There's really no changes to that in my view. We've got flash services and manufacturing PMIs come out on Friday. And this week is more about earnings. There are a lot of companies reporting from a lot of different sectors. Abbott and Bank of America, for, Freeport McMoran and IBM and all of these different companies. You've got some energy names, you've got some consumer names, some financials, you've got a whole mix. We're right in the heart of earnings season. Hope you enjoyed this market roundup. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.